Callisto Protocol, but at least that game looks nice. This spaceship is just so boring. They're clearly trying to invoke HR Giga with the visuals, which is not in itself a horrible idea, but they do it in the blandest way possible, and it clashes so hard with the kooky movie-inspired enemy design and terrible sound effects. So many of the rooms are just empty corridors or hallways. Maybe they have a weird little alien console or a random item, but that's usually it. The game makes no attempt to explain what anything you find actually does either. Everything just looks like random background detail. The red key doesn't go with the red door. There isn't even a red door with which the red key can go. This thing in the background here, if you don't interact with it, you can't finish the level. What is it? What does it do? I don't know. Just press it. This thing here, this is the level exit. You find it halfway through the map. How are you meant to know it ends the mission? Fuck you! Hey, did you know enemies can drop key items? Did you know enemies can drop items at all? No? Should have read the manual. Just kidding, it doesn't tell you that either. Fuck you. Hey, you get that out of here. I've already written the joke. Oh, and remember that safe under the computer desk? I hope you found the flare inside it, because you need it here to get into the second half of the spaceship, and if you don't have it, you're soft-locked. Just kidding, the devs put one down here anyway because they knew people would miss it the first time around. Huh, it uninstantiates if you pick it up with the first flare already in your inventory. What a great game. The thing is, I think with enough time you could probably trial and error adventure game logic bullshit your way through this spaceship. There are only so many things to interact with and so many items in your inventory that eventually you'll just be able to brute force it, like I did kicking the icy door open. But you don't have enough time to brute force it. You don't have time at all. As soon as you enter the spaceship, a secret countdown starts that the game never bothers to inform you of. And if the timer reaches 0, that's it. Game over. And the spaceship is also a maze. And the enemies respawn. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? It's a pretty substantial countdown too. It's not like Resident Evil's 3 minutes to self-destruct. I spent over 15 minutes running around in circles through the spaceship and almost managed to complete it before the timer hit 0. I know in the recording it looks like I caused the explosion by pressing this button on the console. And side note, but how the fuck are you meant to figure out you're supposed to press this specific part of the screen? Just because the cursor changes? Actually, never mind, I'm getting off topic. And it's really not helped by the fact the developers were so rushed they had to include the mission failed cutscene inside the mission complete cutscene. But I swear it just happened at the perfect moment. I reloaded and did it again, no worries. At least the maze itself isn't too difficult to navigate. It's a maze only in the barest sense of the word. Throughout the spaceship you'll come across random doors that are just one-way loops back to the starting room. They do contain goodies like health and ammo and the flare if you haven't picked it up yet, but otherwise they're just present to waste your time. Oh no, it's me. Once you know what you're doing, you can complete the spaceship in about 5 minutes. You can bypass just about every enemy, and the puzzles are so basic they barely qualify for the name. Punch man, pick up key, open door, wash, rinse, repeat. The rest of them are just adventure game logic you brought the Ray-Bans. There's only one section of the spaceship that I really want to praise, and it's this room here, because this is the only part of the level that actually matches the tone of horror that it has tried so hard to create since the player was unceremoniously dumped at the start of the mission. Seeing a fellow MIB agent gummed up in some weird alien pod and reduced to a brain in a suit, sunnies and all, is actually a pretty effective and creepy image. It is a great climactic moment for the level in terms of tone and body horror, and a glimpse at what this game could have been had it received the time and money and effort it so desperately needed to be good. Shame they spoiled it in the briefing cutscene. And with that we are finally done with level 1. Hang on, why was the guy in the pod? How did he become a brain man? What were the aliens doing at the Arctic outpost? What infection was spreading through the researchers? The numbers, Mason, what do they mean? How did the spaceship exploding resolve the problem? What is happening in this game? Mission 2 is set in the Amazon, and this is really faint praise, but it is easily the best level in the game. Well, no, that's wrong. Let me rephrase that. It is the least worst level in the game. Actually, no, that's still wrong. It is the most potentially interesting level in the game, in that it gives you a glimpse at what the developers were probably aiming for before whatever happened happened. Once again, the setup for the mission is actually pretty decent. Strange reports have been coming out of Para El Diablo, a mining town hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest owned by the Tentrix Company. Or is it the Tentrex Company? I'm not sure. The name is spelled differently on the same document. Anyway, according to rumours, the miners have uncovered something at the bottom of the mine, something otherworldly, and it's unleashed a plague of madness onto the town. The T-Rex Company won't let anyone leave. No one knows what's going on. Looks like it's up to the Men in Black to sneak in and set things right. It's a great idea. Once again, it's not really Men in Black, but it's a great hook for a horror game, and the atmosphere actually kind of lives up to the potential for one brief moment. This is the one point in the game where the distant camera angles actually kind of work. It gives you the sense that you're being watched by something much larger than yourself, something far more impersonal and calculating. And you are. The town is covered in armed guards keeping an eye on things from every direction. It's only when you run close to a building and out of their line of sight that the camera angles move back into something more claustrophobic. The guards aren't the only ones around town either. There are a bunch of civilians just hanging around. Some are hostile, some are just trying to go about their business and will leave you alone. A few are actively trying to escape. The town, tiny though it is, actually feels like a place in the process of collapse that you have just stumbled into right before it passes the point of no return. The stranglehold the Tentrex Company has over the inhabitants is made explicitly clear, and it's obvious the miners fear their employer just as much as they are terrified of confronting whatever they discovered at the bottom of the mine. There's an atmosphere of genuine dread that hangs over this brief section of the level, and for the few minutes that it lasts, it's great. There's no bonkers nightmare logic when it comes to figuring out what you're meant to do here either. The backgrounds are less cluttered and the important interactive elements are well telegraphed through lighting or positioning. The key items all do things you would expect them to do. For example, the credit card is actually used as a credit card, and not something insane like a key or a doorstep. And best of all, the game actually gives you directions on where to go and what to do. The Men in Black have an informant already in place, so your first task is to find them. You are encouraged to explore the town in order to find the informant, but it's not actually your goal. You can finish the level without ever laying eyes on them, but by giving you the initial objective of wandering the town and inspecting all the buildings in your search, you're going to come across Francisco, one of the miners hiding out above the bar. And he is the one who gives you your next goal, getting him a ticket out of town in exchange for information on how to get into the mine. This is a side note, but I really like how Francisco is incorporated into the background here. It's a really clever use of the survival horror style. To get him a ticket you need a credit card, but that is also something you'll come across naturally as you explore the town. One of the buildings you can enter is a medical clinic manned by a very stressed doctor who will attack on sight once he sees you. It's on his beaten corpse that you'll find the credit card needed to buy Francisco a ticket home. The medical clinic is a feast of atmosphere too. The infected miner on the bed, the doctor's hastily scribbled notes, the chaotic mess of dropped medical supplies, it's all really good. The environmental storytelling is super effective. You've probably already seen where you need to take the credit card too. You saw it the second you arrived. And where else would you go to buy a boat ticket home but the dock? It all makes sense. Get the ticket to Francisco and he'll point you in the right direction. To get the keys to the mine, you'll need to touch the chupacabra, which, if you've been exploring thoroughly, will lead you right back to the alleyway behind the medical clinic. And what do you know? Touching the goat sucker gets you into the backyard of the administration building. Alternatively, if you're brave enough, you could always just storm the front door. Ha-ha! I'm kidding. The guards don't care if you run past them. The door they're guarding isn't even functional. You can't fight them anyway. They're invincible. Unfortunately, this is the point where the mission's surprisingly good pacing ends. The rest of the Amazon mission from this point onward is just a return to the linear, insane puzzle logic slog that the rest of the game has been and will continue to be until it's over, which is a real shame because this section is genuinely decent and gives you a sense of what exactly the developers were aiming for when they set out to make the game. Don't get me wrong, it's still got its fair share of weird jank. For example, the guards frisk you at the gate before you enter town, but don't actually take your weapons. And if you do actually find the informant, well...
Boy, am I glad I didn't drink that. I look terrible in slippers.
What took you so long?
Traffic was a bitch.
There are other weird little things too that give me the impression that the level, and presumably the entire game, was meant to be much larger and far more non-linear. For example, when you return to the dock with the credit card, the guards have been replaced by this drunk old man. You can have a conversation with him and he mentions wanting to leave town, but you can't buy him a ticket or give him Francisco's. You can't do anything for him. The informant gives you a gun, but doesn't actually tell you anything about how to progress. There are all these buildings you can't get into, even though they're guarded and have backgrounds made for their front doors. It feels like you were originally meant to have access to so much more of the town, and that you originally had a lot more choice in how you made your way through it. Imagine how amazing that would be. Maybe you meet up with the informant and follow their advice. Maybe you stumble onto Francisco and help him escape. Maybe you take pity on a drunk old man and he surprises you by helping you into the mine. Maybe you could help the doctor find a cure to the infection ravaging the town. Maybe by going out of your way to help one, you seal the fate of the others. And since we're here, let's extrapolate. Maybe some of the people you meet are working to their own agenda and lying to you about their intentions. Maybe you could try to break the company's death grip on its employees by exposing its unethical work practices. Maybe you could break the company by liberating the town. Maybe you could just do your job and focus on the alien threat down the mine. Perhaps by siding with one character you would get to explore parts of the town you wouldn't by siding with another. And by extension, maybe you only get the whole story by playing through every iteration of the level. And if this is all before you even get into the mine, imagine how incredible that would be with this scenario, let alone with Men in Black's other 3 missions. I joked before that I'm not looking for a Men in Black immersive sim, but I don't know, maybe I am. Has anyone ever made a retro survival horror immersive sim? Am I going to have to make a retro survival horror immersive sim? It's always disappointing when your favourite aspect of a game is something you've projected onto it, but hey, that's just the way it goes sometimes. Even more disappointing is that the rest of the level is complete shit.
Bummer.
The effort that went into the early section of the level might as well evaporate between these 2 screens. The Chupacabra didn't just open the door when you touched it, it sucked out all the good design decisions and intuitive game mechanics that the mission had been making fantastic use of up to this point. We're back to random enemies standing in corners and key items lying around the environment like someone just tossed them in through a window. The camera angles go back to being awful too. This fight is made next to impossible due to the fact the camera is positioned somewhere in the next fucking universe compared to your chosen Men in Black agent. The last obstacle before the gate to the mines is this gauntlet of spotlights, and it is barely a puzzle. You're meant to avoid the lights, but the damage you take if one spots you is so small that there's no reason not to just run straight through to the gate. Thus we reach the mines. Welcome to hell. Abandon hope, ye who enter here. The mines are the reason I wanted to make this video. It is a non-stop gauntlet of horrible game design. It is a masterclass in what not to do. There's so much to unpack here, I genuinely don't know where to begin. From my tone of voice, I'm sure you're expecting me to tell you this is another timed maze, but no. Oh, I bet that a maze is what the mine was meant to be. The intent is clearly there, but like so much of this game, they didn't have the time or budget for that, so it's just a linear series of tunnels with 2 side rooms off the main entrance. It starts off pretty well with the run across this old, dilapidated bridge, and the encounter with your first roly-poly chasing this freaked out miner. Look at him go. You have to kill the roly-poly, but fun fact, you can also kill the miner if you're quick enough. You know what, maybe this actually is an immersive sim. There's no reason to stop the miner, but you do definitely have to defeat the roly-poly, because he drops a key item. 1 of 3, in fact. The second is just on a miner in the next room. You don't even have to stay and fight the enemy here, you can just grab the thing and leave. Job done. There's not even any reason to go into the second side room. It's just another boring fight for a tiny amount of ammo. This is what I meant when I said it feels like there's meant to be a huge maze here, with a bunch of intersecting tunnels and dead ends, but they just couldn't achieve their vision, so instead just dumped the key items right next to each other at the very start of the area. If that's actually true, and not just conjecture on my part, I'm not that upset the maze was cut. Once you've got the 2 reliefs from the start of the mine, it's just a short run down this tunnel to the moment this game goes from simply bad to absolutely atrocious. Just look at it. the gaping chasm, the moving platforms, the armed roly-poly spinning like a turret to MLG 360 no-scope you in slow motion. This is it. This is the moment I have been looking forward to tearing apart this whole video. This screen is the reason my friend brought Men in Black to my attention when we played it together back in 2019, because this is as far into the game as he ever got on his own. Every time he had gone back to it over the years, he had reached this point and just thrown in the towel. In that interview with CD Magazine I quoted before, David Koenig estimated around 25 to 35 hours of gameplay, which is, okay, sure, whatever David, you keep huffing that copium. But in my friend's case, he was actually lowballing by about 183,930 hours. This was his game in White Whale, so I guess we'd better slay it. Before we even get into the jumping puzzle itself, you need to deal with MLG roly-poly on the other side of the chasm, and melee is not an option. Not only is this dude doing a 360 no-scope on you, he's camping. There is no way to reach him up on his pillar of sin, and even if you could jump your way into melee range, you have maybe 10 seconds at most before he turns around and starts blasting. Your only option is to pull out a gun and pray you can find him in your sights before he finds you in his. I'm going to save the discussion on the combat for later, because that is a whole other can of worms. But to give you a little wriggly entree, the aiming system in this game does not work like Resident Evil's as you might expect. Keen-eyed viewers may have noticed little circles appearing on enemies while engaging in ranged combat, and it is only when those circles light up that you know you are going to hit your target. And the margin for error is narrow. You can make shots without the circle lighting up first, but it's never a sure thing. Painting a target guarantees a hit. It's just an absolute fucking bastard finding the right angle to do so. You can be aiming directly at an enemy, but somehow get a target on someone else standing behind them. So the second you enter this area, it becomes a race between you and the MLG roly-poly to take the bloody shot. You can stun lock enemies with guns if you're quick enough on the draw, but they can do the exact same thing to you if they get there first. And you don't have the space here to reposition if you can't get a good angle like you can in most other encounters. It is so easy to walk right off the edge of the cliff here, because it's so unclear where the game thinks the actual edge is, compared to where the background presents it to be. And if you do fall, or fail at any point during this puzzle, on the PS1 version, have fun going back through the entirety of the mine in order to reach this screen again, and take another shot at this smug bastard.
Fucking camper.
Remember when I mentioned way back when I was talking about the New York level, how having to go through the tedious combat encounters each time you reload a save, just to have another chance? You have to go through at least 2 combat encounters with the roly-poly from the start of the mine, and MLG roly-poly upon his throne of grief. But you also might have to go through a 3rd in this side room with Mr. Chonky if you're low on ammo, because like I said, there's no way to defeat this guy without a gun, and how would you know that if you've never played the game before? At least once you deal with the MLG roly-poly, the time-sensitive aspect of this puzzle is done with. You can take all the time in the world getting through the rest of it, but the knowledge that you're going to have to do it all again on the game's terms if you fail never goes away. It is going to hang over you for every single second you spend on this screen. So let's get to it. I haven't really spoken about the game's jumping mechanics before, because up to this point they haven't really been used in any major way. The last time was back in New York. The Arctic level didn't feature it at all, and after this point in the Amazon level, it's never really required again, unless you're too slow getting to these elevators at the start of the final level. This moment is the mechanical climax of Men in Black's jumping puzzles, and in terms of difficulty spikes, it is like going from climbing Mount Kosciuszko to climbing Mount Everest. Just about every other jump in the game up to this point has been rendered needlessly difficult by unhelpful camera angles. Like with the aiming, jumping requires pinpoint accuracy that fixed camera angles really can't provide the way they are positioned here. Take the jumps I've already mentioned on the New York rooftops. You're not given a good view of the gap between the buildings either because they're too far away or too close to the edge of the screen, and Agent J inevitably ends up blocking what little look you do get when you step up to make the jump. Just to add insult to injury, the screens change the moment you jump off the roof, and it is so jarring, especially with how long it takes to load between backgrounds. I get why they made it that way though. If you can actually find an angle where the game can't hide the jump from you, it's fucking hilarious. These are probably the worst offenders before, you know, but the first jump in the game is pretty poorly telegraphed too. Even a step out of line and you're in for a long drop and a sudden stop. A missed jump is an instant death too, which makes sense when jumping between buildings or across bottomless pits, but comes off as a little unfair when you miss something like this. Come on, that was barely a drop. I don't even know how I missed it. It's so inconsistent, or at least it feels that way given you can barely see where you're jumping half the time. The only real jumping puzzle prior to the Amazon level is this section in the New York mission where you have to climb up the side of a building using a big pile of boxes someone just dumped on the side of the road. And, well, even when the platforms are stationary, it can be a nightmare. The game is as strict with accepting you actually jumped at or landed on a platform as it is vague with where the edges of those platforms actually lie. It's just so clunky. It's one of those things where watching a video of it just can't convey the jank, or the input lag, or the moment of terror in your heart where you don't know whether you've made it or been sent back to the last save. And that's all before you add in the complication of moving platforms. There's only one other point in the game that presents a jumping puzzle anywhere close in challenge to this chasm in the Amazon mission, and about 20 years ago when this video started, I gave a quick glimpse of it before moving on. That's right, this monstrosity in the obstacle course back in MIBHQ. I think I've already said enough to explain why this is a bad tutorial, but at the very least it warns you of the possibility that there might be more puzzles like it somewhere in the game, but only if you can get that far into this 3 rage games in a trench coat of a tutorial, and like I've already mentioned, there's just no reason to play it. The game already threw you in the deep end with the New York level. This is just unnecessary extra pain. While we're on the subject of tutorials, I want to pivot back to Tomb Raider for a moment. I've already gushed about Croft Manor and how fantastic a learning tool it is for new players, but for those uninterested in giving it a go, the game also goes out of its way to provide a decent jumping puzzle tutorial in the second level, the city of Vilcabamba. Up to this point, the jumps have been pretty simple. There's been a few climbing sections and a few bigger jumps, but nothing too crazy. That changes once you reach this tower structure. In order to open the central door and continue, you need to climb up both towers and pull the levers at their summits. This is the first major jumping puzzle in the game. Both towers require a decent amount of coordination to climb, and introduce a lot of the different moves that the player will need to complete the entire game. Standing jumps, running jumps, mantling. It gives you the chance to take things fast by layering the floor with these collapsing platforms, and if you're skilled enough, you can actually use them to progress. But if you're more of a beginner, they help reinforce the fact that this game rewards technique over speed in most cases. But what I like most about this section is that while it does present the greatest amount of verticality seen in the game up to this point, it does so above 2 pools of water. Don't get me wrong, it is very possible to take damage in these sections from a bad jump or an unlucky fall, but most of the time you'll just end up in the water, and all you have to do is climb out and start again. It doesn't punish you for not being a master Tomb Raider so early in the game. Like with Croft Manor, you're given all the time and attempts you need to complete the puzzle. It's a great introduction to the jumping mechanics within the campaign itself, and an example of how something early on in a game can still be challenging without being unfair. The first jump you make in Men in Black is into a dumpster, and you can die from it. Fuck you. What a great game. Something else notable about Tomb Raider is that it never features a jumping puzzle with moving platforms. Not once. I played the entirety of the game just to check if there was ever an instance of a moving platform in a jumping puzzle, and there isn't. For the vast majority of the game, you are free to take the puzzles at your own pace. It is only during the last couple of levels that they add obstacles to ratchet up the urgency, like rolling boulders or collapsing platforms. But at no point is the player required to jump onto something that's moving or from something that's moving. Even with a fully 3D environment and a third-person camera, the developers understood the limits of their game's mechanics. It struggles with edges enough as it is. Could you imagine trying to make make some of these jumps onto or from a moving platform. And since we're here, we might as well take a look at Resident Evil's jumping puzzles too. What's that? It doesn't have any? Wow, it's almost like jumping mechanics just don't fit very well into a fixed camera survival horror game. I never would have guessed. During our 2019 playthrough, this was the moment my friend had been waiting for. He wanted me to suffer the way he had suffered. He expected us to be stuck at it for weeks. It took me an hour. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes all you need to solve a problem is a fresh set of eyes. I don't blame him for getting it wrong for so long though. I only lucked into the solution by complete accident. See this platform? It looks like it's moving back and forth along the Z-axis, but it is actually moving up and down along the Y-axis. The only way I figured it out was when I took a chance leap from the previous platform while this one was at its lowest point and still landed on it rather than falling to my death. I wasn't even aiming for it either. I figured it must be a debate, a trap, and so was just trying to bypass it. Either way, once you know where all the platforms are going, it is still a shitty puzzle because it is an absolute crapshoot whether the game deigns to let you make a jump or not. It's still super easy to slide off the edge of a platform or completely screw up the aim of a jump because of the awkward camera angle and terrible controls. Even knowing what to do, we still failed it once or twice. So here we are, at the end of all things, at the furthest from the Shire my friend has ever been. From this point on, we were both in uncharted waters. We had no idea what to expect. The jumping puzzle from hell is a short gauntlet of puzzles and combat encounters that only sink to lower and lower depths of insanity the further into the mine you venture, culminating in the game's first big boss fight. The first puzzle actually isn't terrible from a design standpoint. You need to input the right pattern through these raised stones in the floor for each relief you put down to unlock the door to the alien ruins underneath the mine. The first one is easy. You just walk across the stones and you're done. But the other two reliefs increase the difficulty by changing which parts of the square rise or lower as a result of where you step. Better yet, you're allowed to keep the hint for the puzzle you can find back across the bridge in town. It's a decent challenge, and the only bit of the game's patented bullshit present is the fact that you have to do the reliefs in a specific order. It is the single shining zircon in what is otherwise one long river of shit. The alien ruins beyond the relief door actually look pretty good. I really like the design of the place. It feels sufficiently ancient and otherworldly, but you won't have any time to appreciate it because the second you enter this area, you will be too busy fighting for your life. Some of the Greys now have the ability to beam scenes from Lost's final season directly into your brain from across the fucking planet, and the resulting psychic damage is enough to drop you dead in seconds. Even if you do manage to close the gap, he knows Kung Fu. He's just going to bully the shit out of you and send you back to the last save. Not that you can close the gap either, because the crab crew is here to get in your way and ruin your day. And just as a cherry on top, none of them drop anything. Fuck you. What a great game. After that, it's a short jog down a flight of stairs and that's it, a dead end. There's this weird little thing in the center of the room, but if you stand on it, it one-hit kills you. Thanks, game. It looks important, like you're meant to place an item there, but no, nothing you have will work. There is nothing to do here but die. Back when we first played it, my friend and I figured we'd missed something, so we ran back up the stairs and through the rest of the ruins. Nothing. We even reloaded back before the jumping puzzle just to check if there was some sort of key item that we'd accidentally missed. Implausible as that sounded, but we had, and you're looking at it right now. Say hello to Mr. Invisible. He's there, I promise. We only figured out he was hanging around halfway up the steps once we stopped to examine the area and started taking phantom damage. It turns out reaching the bottom of the stairs acts as a spawn trigger for this guy, and just... why? Why would you give the player no indication that anything has changed? The backgrounds are the same, the enemy cannot be seen, and yet defeating him is the only way to actually progress. He doesn't follow you past this screen either, so if you zoom up the stairs to check out the other rooms, you'll never get any indication that he's there unless he happens to make a grunt as you pass by. And why wouldn't you zoom past? It's a flight of stairs! I'm going to have to refer to that quote about Battlefield Earth again because Men in Black clearly knows that other survival horror games use backtracking, but does not understand why, or even how. You need a far larger, far less linear space to throw in any sort of backtracking, but more importantly, you need locked doors that correspond to specific obvious keys, or obstacles that have clear solutions. Everyone gives the early Resident Evil games a lot of grief for how silly it is for, to give an example, a police station to use keys based on the suits in a deck of cards. But it makes the solution very clear. It tells you exactly what doors you need to backtrack to with what key to open them. When player action changes the game space in any way, it is usually communicated clearly. Hunters don't just show up once the player returns to the mansion. They get a big fancy FMV cutscene as an introduction, and they certainly aren't fucking invisible. Yet, when Jill or Rebecca tickle the ivories in the bar, it's not like doing so unlocks a secret room on the other side of the fucking building without telling you. Tomb Raider's exactly the same. It's rare that you'll come across a lever or lock that doesn't have an obvious clear purpose, and while it's not afraid to spawn enemies around you just out of sight, at least they have textures. It's worse than trial and error because there is no error here on the part of the player. It's just a cruel trap that you can't see coming, but the game is only too happy to stand aside and let you bumble into it, or in this case past it. Even once you know Mr. Invisible is there, it can be a nightmare to take him down because you can't see him. He'll just stand in place and bully you while you spin around desperately hoping to find the right angle that will actually land you a hit. After the first strike, it becomes much easier, not only because you can stun lock him, but because getting punched in the face actually makes him visible for a moment. And it's only then, once you take him down, that the secret door in the wall opens to let you through. The strangest part is that Mr. Invisible is the only enemy in the whole game to wield this power, so why would you think to check for him, when the game has never introduced the possibility of invisible enemies and never will again? It's bizarre, I don't get it. Why is it like this? Through the open door is not a whole new section of the ruins, but a single hallway with a single roly-poly and a plinth on which to place the idol that the roly-poly drops. This provides you with the hint for the next puzzle, where you have to arrange a bunch of mini idols around the instant death plate down at the bottom of the stairs. Gee, I sure hope they don't make the hint needlessly obtuse by showing the plinth at a strange angle or getting the colour of the idols wrong. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? Anyway, they made the hint needlessly obtuse by showing the plinth at a strange angle and just getting the colour of the idols wrong. This one here is meant to represent the black idol, but it more closely resembles the white idol. This one at the front could easily be interpreted as the black idol because it's front lit, and all we get to see from the camera angle is the shadow behind it. It's so confusing, and it really doesn't help that the puzzle and its hint are several screens apart, meaning back in the day, you would have to keep running back and forth to check whether or not you've done it correctly, or even if you've written down the hint the right way, which you probably won't have because the game just doesn't understand how colours work. Just putting the idols down in the right spot is a chore because the game provides absolutely no feedback on whether you've done it or not, even if they're placed in the right spot. The only way to know if you've completed the puzzle correctly is to step onto the instant death plate in the middle of the circle, which will still just kill you if you've done it wrong. And even if you do get it right, your reward is to be dropped feet first into a boss fight with a bug. I'm going to save the discussion on combat for a little bit longer, but rest assured that it's pretty shit. It's so shit, in fact, that my friend and I actually had to restart the entire game because we had accidentally soft-locked ourselves into a position where we couldn't actually defeat it. Needless to say, we were livid at having to start the game again. I don't think we touched it for weeks after coming to that awful realization, but we did. Okay. So that was the Amazon mission. Pretty much this game in microcosm, both the best and worst of what it has to offer. We're in the home stretch now. Only one more level to go, and I can exorcise this demon from my life. Hang on, what was the infection plaguing the town? What happened to the Tentrex Corporation? What were aliens doing at the bottom of an Amazonian mine? Why did we get abducted at the end of the level, and how did we end up back at MIB HQ? I feel like I'm losing my mind. Did we even resolve the problem? What the hell is going on? Mission 3 is set in the Pacific Northwest, on the island estate of billionaire tech magnate Skip Frails. Agent H was sent ahead of you to snoop around, but now he's missing, and Zed is getting worried. This final mission is an off-the-books infiltration into the home of the richest man in the world to discover what exactly he's hiding on his island. As usual, it's a great setup, but it falls apart pretty much instantly. The final level is one long gauntlet of combat. There is a puzzle or two sprinkled in as a little wilted garnish, but for the most part, all you'll be doing this entire level is fighting endless hordes of the same enemies you've already been battling the entire game, and it is exhausting. Which is a real shame, because this is the most inventive the backgrounds get. There's a ton of cool imagery, like this giant alien manufacturing plant, and this hallway full of people who have been turned into brain men. This room might be cancer from a mechanical perspective, but visually it's great. It's also the only level in the game that comes anywhere close to evoking the tone and style of both the movie and the comics, without it clashing like oil on water. An even bigger wasted opportunity is the fact that the infiltration promised in the opening cutscene is ruined the second you start the level. Don't get me wrong, I do not want to know what stealth mechanics would have looked like in this game, because we both know they would have been atrocious. But like with the Amazon level, just imagine if this scenario had been fleshed out to its full potential. Keep the alien